Another guy who got lofty comparisons to on is Will Johnson, who's our collective number 2 corner in this year's class. I freaking still love this guy. I think this guy is as smart as they come as a corner. Outstanding play recognition. When I was watching his tape from even his freshman year, because I turned that on too, he recognizes routes at such a high level.
And I'll tell you what, if there's receivers out there that get lazy with their routes in front of Will Johnson, because there's reps like that, if they get lazy, if they half-ass it, oh no, he's housing it.
Oh yeah,
because he's just he don't care. He don't care what you're doing.
He knows what you're running before you even do it.
Yeah,
like he actually makes breaks and routes before the receivers even make the break. Like he is such a smart player. You could tell this guy watches tape at all times out there. Also, I want to shout this out too. I know people are going to talk about the fact that he had the turf toe injury, and some people think he might have given up on Michigan this past year after only playing a few games. He still gives his all when he's out there. There's one play I want to shout out specifically. In the Texas game that we were at, Texas was up by 18 in the second half of that game. This is when everyone thought Michigan was still a national title or at least a playoff contender, right? Texas was beating the brakes off of Michigan in the Big House, right? Up 18 points in the third quarter of that game. They give a handoff, I believe,
wasn't it Wingo?
I think it was Ryan Wingo.
An end around or a reverse to Ryan Wingo,
right? So end around to Ryan Wingo on the opposite side of where Will Johnson is, right? So Will Johnson's on one side of the field. They're running an end around on the opposite side. Wingo, who's very fast, is about to take off and score a touchdown.
He's gone.
Will Johnson on the other side of the field. They're down by 18 points in the third quarter with no passing game to speak of. This game is by far over. Dalton and I are actually packing our stuff up, probably trying to get out because it was about a 4.5 hour ride home for us. So we're packing our stuff up. Will Johnson from the opposite side of the field chases down Wingo, probably runs like 60 yards to get to him, and tackles him at the 2-yard line. Now, I believe Texas still scored a touchdown immediately after because that's what they're doing against Michigan all day. But that kind of effort shows the type of player and type of human being Will Johnson is. So anyone saying, okay, yeah, he gave up on his team this past year, I do think injuries were a big part of his season. I do think he was suffering a lot of injuries, not just the turf toe. And I think at some point he's probably like, listen, I'm going to shut it down. Like, I'm not going to try to ruin my draft stock because we're not making a playoff. We're barely going to make a bowl game as well. But for anyone who's questioning his heart or anything like that, turn on the Texas game, turn on that play specifically. That'll show you the kind of heart that Will Johnson has. And besides that, he has been a dominant player in college football. In his true freshman year, 91.1 grade in man coverage, led all Power 5 corners. In fact, it was tied for the best in the country with Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell had a great rookie year with the Eagles, and it was a really good corner in college football with Toledo, obviously. Also, had the same coverage grade in man coverage as Will Johnson. He was 2 years older than him, and he played in the MAC. Will Johnson played in the Big Ten. Right? So really good in-man coverage. As a sophomore, 29.1 passer rating allowed, 5th among all corners in the nation. And like Ben Morrison against league competition, he really showed up. On 6 targets against Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze last year, Johnson allowed just 3 catches and had an interception. So he had allowed a 50% completion rate against those 2 top 10 picks and came down with an interception as well. His technique is phenomenal, and he has really good size at 6'2", 194. Doesn't have top-end speed, but is good enough. 30 and 1/8 inch arms, only 10th percentile. Not the best for a guy who likes to live in press coverage, but he's very good in zone coverage as well. He battled injuries over the last 2 years, and he had a season-ending turf toe this past season. Special tape in his first 2 years of college football that made everyone, including us, think he's a top 5 pick in the draft. But he was severely limited by injuries this past year before completely shutting down. Again, he's not an elite athlete, but his technique and his route recognition and and how smart he is since his freshman year has been phenomenal. High floor player, can work in any scheme. And Dawn, my first year of really scouting players is the 2021 draft, and I remember scouting Pat Surtain and saying, this guy just gets it, man. The IQ and the technique is so freaking good. And I was amazed that not a lot of people thought Surtain was a top 5 talent in the draft. I had him as a top 5 talent in that draft.
Another defensive player of the year.
Another defensive player of the year. I watched Will Johnson. I'm like, dude, yeah, the top end speed might not be there like Surtain either, but the football IQ, the technique is just so freaking good. That's why my comp is Pat Surtain, even though it's very lofty.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the concern, number one is the injuries. Because even in 2023, and he was still really good, you could tell, I forget which leg was bothering him, but you could tell he had a harder time cutting off that one than the other one. And this year, the annoying lower body injuries kind of lingered with him in 2024. But still a really good year. And you mentioned it. If he doesn't have A+ speed, okay, he's got B to B+ speed, and sometimes vertically, that can get him into some challenges with certain guys who are absolute blazers, right? But when you talk about a guy who can make up for that slight, very slight lack of speed, the technique and the ability to get ahead and make those reads and run routes before the receivers do, it's such an advantage, right? This is as smooth a technician at cornerback as we have out of any player in this class. I'm with you. I mean, as long as the health concerns aren't a huge issue, it's a top 15 player, if not higher. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just everything that you want in a corner. 6'2", 194, B to B plus speed, A plus recognition, right? And smart man or zone coverage. I'd even like to see him a little more in off zone coverage to be allowed to use his eyes and react to things the way that he does, because he's got an extremely high football IQ to be able to read the concepts in front of him. I mean, look, I get it. If you have Barron number 2, fine. I think this was very close because Barron's so versatile and he's an explosive athlete. But Johnson, is this another case where we're doing a little overthinking here with Will?
So.
When some people are talking Will Johnson, he's CB 4, 5, or 6, whatever. I'm like, watch this guy. Watch the 3 years, and even when he wasn't 100%, still arguably the best corner in the country. Man-to-man, zone, whatever. He's, like you mentioned with Surtain, I think Trevor's got a Darius Slay comp in there who, people forget, Darius Slay, I believe, is a 6-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
Pretty darn good player in his career. I think you're getting a starting potential CB1 in Will Johnson, and it just has to be. And again, another one, I think that's where you get to the top of the line here with these corners. Scheme don't matter.
No.
He can work. Again, if he's another one. If Jonathan Gannon wanted him at 16 in his defense, sure. If there's somebody, if I don't think Dallas, they're pretty loaded at corner. I don't care. Any of those teams in the top 20, Will Johnson's going to make their football team better.
I think if he stays healthy, which that is, for me, the biggest question with him right now, because injuries have bothered him for 2 years in a row now. But if he stays healthy, I think he's going to be a top 10 to 15 corner in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, again, it's just I think he's a guy that coaches are going to love, because even for the slight bit of speed that he doesn't have A+ speed, okay, fine. He's got enough. He's a good enough technician, and he's got a high enough football IQ to make up that extra step that somebody might have on him in a 40-yard dash. He can get ahead of it and make that up and be just fine.
No, that's a great way to put it, because I think his physical speed, like you said, is a B+. His mental speed is an A+++.
Yes.
And that makes up for a lot, right there. I'd actually rather have that guy than a guy who can run a 4.2, right? But it doesn't have the anticipation that Will Johnson has.
And he makes you work, and you can tell on some breakups, and even the interception against Marvin Harrison that you mentioned, I think in the 2023 game.
On the slant route, yeah.
On the slant. That's what, if you get in any way lazy on your routes at all against Will Johnson, if you have that thing where, I don't think I'm getting the ball this, and I'm going to 3/4 this route, Will Johnson's going to make you pay for it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what, if you play down to his speed, you're going to have a rough day. You better be 110 every single route, because you're not going to get that many opportunities.
The amount of times I've seen receivers have to play defense on Will Johnson because he has more of a right to the football than they do, because he legitimately runs their route better than they do because he's that smart of a player. It's crazy, man. Honestly, it's crazy. That's again, Will Johnson, I haven't put together my final big board yet, but I think it's going to be somewhere in the top 10, at worst top 15. I mean, absolutely at worst top 15. So I think Will Johnson's still a special talent overall. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.